Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is Damien. This is video 2 out of 3 in the series, and in this video we will be looking specifically at the clutch pedal, how important the clutch pedal is when we are driving, and also looking at the biting point and getting the biting point in preparation for us moving the car in video 3. Okay, here we go. Okay, the clutch pedal. In the last video, we had a look at the position of the clutch, where it was in terms of the 3 pedals, and also which leg operated the clutch pedal. So if you're not sure or didn't see the video, please have a look back and have a quick recap. Okay, in terms of when we use the clutch, there are 3 occasions when you'll have to use your clutch pedal. The first one is to get the car moving from a stationary position. So in the next video, we'll have a look at how to move the car using the clutch pedal. Now, generally when you're moving off and accelerating away, there has to be some gas pedal as well, but just for the purposes of the video, we'll just use the clutch to get us moving, and that's video 3. The other occasion when you'll have to use your clutch is just before you change gear. And the third occasion that you'll have to press your clutch all the way down is just before you come to a stop. So let's imagine you're approaching a red traffic light. As you're beginning to slow the car down, just before you stop the car completely, the clutch has to go all the way down to avoid you stalling. Now, in terms of what the clutch does, I often feel it's important for you to understand the mechanics of the clutch itself to help you to understand how to operate it. I often think if you know how something works, you're better placed to be able to use it more effectively. Now, I'm no mechanic, I don't have an engineering degree, so I'm going to explain this extremely simply and extremely crudely, so I do apologise for those mechanics and engineers out there. Now, the clutch itself is 2 pieces of metal. Crudely, one of the pieces of metal is connected by a rod to the engine, and the other piece of metal is connected by a rod to the wheels. When I press the clutch all the way down, those 2 pieces of metal separate, okay, and therefore it breaks the connection between the engine and the wheels. Now, when I'm going to go into a first gear for the biting point section, so again the clutch has to go down, it separates the 2 pieces of metal, allowing me to go into gear. If the clutch doesn't go all the way down, I won't be able to go into gear. Okay, now when the clutch pedal goes all the way down, I have to slowly raise it to find the biting point, which we'll have a look at in the next part of the video. Now, when the clutch pedal slowly rises backwards, the 2 pieces of metal come together. Now, because the engine is spinning or rotating, when the other piece of metal begins to get closer to it, it also begins to turn as well, which in effect then turns the wheels. Again, I did tell you it was quite crude. Now, it's called biting point because the 2 pieces of metal have teeth, so when they come together, they bite each other. Okay, that's a very quick explanation of it. Now, when you perhaps are seeing other learners or other drivers bouncing or jumping from moving off, all that's happening is these 2 pieces of metal are banging together. So the more control you got over the clutch pedal, the more control you have when the car begins to move away. Okay, we're now going to have a look at taking it that next step further and getting the biting point. So we need to first of all switch the engine on in order to find the biting point. Now at the moment, obviously the engine is not on, so the first thing I'm going to do is just make sure that my gear is in neutral. If I was in a gear, when I tried to start the engine, all that would happen is the car would jolt forwards and not actually start. So that's the first thing that we always do, is make sure that we're in neutral. And again, in that first video on the controls, we looked at where neutral was. So in my car, it's a bit different maybe to the car you're learning in or the car you're going to learn in, is that it's not actually an key ignition, it's actually a start-stop button. So all I'm going to do is press the clutch pedal down and start the engine. Okay, and you can hear the engine there in the background. Now, to get biting point, what I need to do is go into first gear. And going back to what I said about the clutch, I have to press the clutch pedal down to allow that gap to separate between the two pieces of metal and the gear then to be inserted. So the first thing I'm going to do is press the clutch pedal all the way down to the floor until it can go down no further. Now what I'm going to do now is go to my gears and go into first, and first gear is all the way over to the left and it's up. Okay, now if I were to bring my clutch pedal all the way up very, very quickly, two things are going to happen. Number one, I'm going to jolt forwards, and number two, I'm probably going to stall. So all I'm going to do now is very, very slowly raise my clutch pedal a little bit higher, and you're going to hear a few different things. Now remember, when the clutch pedal goes down, those two pieces of metal separate, which allows then the gear to go into place. So the moment with the clutch pedal down, they are separated. Now I'm going to slowly begin to bring that clutch pedal up to the top. Not all the way to the top, just a little bit at first. And what's happening is, if you remember, those two pieces of metal are beginning to come closer together. Now, biting point, you will hear it and you will feel it. Now when you get the biting point, what you perhaps can't appreciate is now the engine noise has made a slight change. There's a slight change in how it sounds. I can also feel the biting point in that my chair slightly shakes on me. Now once I've got the biting point, which is roughly about there, if you notice now, my foot doesn't move at all. If I again was to bring that clutch any higher, the car would jolt forwards and potentially even stall. So I'm going to lock that foot in place, and that is the biting point. So I'll do it one more time. Clutch pedal all the way down, the two pieces of metal separate. I'm now going to slowly bring that clutch pedal a little bit further backwards. The two pieces of metal are beginning to come together, and I'm listening out for that engine sound that's a little bit different. And I'm going to feel the feel the seat slightly vibrate under my legs. Now what's also happening as well is that what you can't appreciate is that the car is slowly going up at the front and down at the back. Go back to what I said about the handbrake. The handbrake controls the back two wheels, and therefore the car's being pulled down at the back. And that is the biting point. So again, if I was to release that clutch pedal completely now, the car would stall on me and jolt forward. So what I'm going to do first of all is press the clutch pedal all the way down, the two pieces of metal separate, and therefore I can now come out of gear into neutral. I can then come off the clutch pedal, and that's it. So that was a quick introduction to the clutch and the biting point. In the next video in the series, we will have a look at using the same principles and getting the car moving a few feet down, a few meters down the road. Again, thank you very much for joining me. If you're able to, please subscribe, hit that bell icon, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care, see you soon.